Uh-oh. Okay, we'll start with this. Claressa Shields has caught wind of Savannah Marshall's expressed desire to face her for a second time and face her at heavyweight. She has since responded saying, "Shut all that soft shit up. Savannah Marshall, I came all the way to the UK to whoop your ass and own you. For the rematch, bring your scary ass to America, and we fight at heavyweight. I'm gonna knock your skinny ass out, so come on with it." Claressa Shields is holding to her original demand, her original stipulation for a rematch, that if there's gonna be one, it's gotta be in America. And while that's not an outlandish request, it is an unrealistic one, meaning that because Claressa won the first fight, she's within her rights to have some say where the rematch takes place. But you want the rematch to happen in America, and it's just not as big in America as it is in the UK. 2 years later, the situation hasn't changed. It's not any better now than it was before. Is Dimitri Salita gonna put the same dollar amount up that Sky Sports and Boxer put up to do the first fight? Is he gonna do that? You know the answer. If he could have done that, he would have done that 2 years ago while talks for a rematch were still fresh. So you can hold to that demand that the second fight has to be in America, but unless you have the money to put up, it may not happen. You know, Claressa Shields says that she traveled to the United Kingdom for the fight without saying why. It's because Sky Sports and Boxer paid for it, not her promoter, not Dimitri Salita. So of course you had to go over there. It's a UK network putting up UK money, more than you've ever made for any other fight. And the same applies to Savannah. But Savannah's not the one pretending that she doesn't need Claressa. She acknowledges that they need each other. It's Claressa who's in denial. Claressa who's only boxed 2 times since the Marshall fight. And those fights were nowhere near as big and paid out nowhere near as much as the Marshall fight did. I remember it was in February of 2023 when Savannah said that the reason Claressa doesn't sell here in America is because of her attitude. I mean, she's right. She's absolutely right. If Claressa were a bigger draw here, then Savannah traveling for the fight wouldn't be a problem. She's not a big draw here. Don't you pay attention? And when people talk about Claressa and what they don't like about her, that's what all of them say. They don't like her attitude. Now, there's this vocal minority. It's a small group of people, not a lot, that they go up to bat for Claressa Shields no matter what she does. Give her a pass for everything. And you can do that. That's your prerogative. Her problem is there aren't enough people like you. Having debuted the same year as Katie Taylor, way back there in 2016, not only is she a less active fighter than Katie, but she's not as well liked as Katie. She's not as well liked as a lot of boxers, some of which are less accomplished than she is. She's accomplished, but she's just as insufferable as she is accomplished. So when I see that the conversation hasn't really changed 2 years later, 2 years after the Savannah Marshall fight, that she's still demanding that Savannah come to America, I get it. You won the first fight, and you earned the right. But that doesn't account for the marquee value you don't have. So if the rematch is contingent upon Savannah Marshall coming to America, the question then is, can Dimitri Salita find the money, the same or more than Sky Sports and Boxer put up in the first fight 2 years ago? Can he do that? Because if he can't, Savannah may not come. Claressa's missing out. And it's not one way. Savannah would be missing out too, but Savannah acknowledges that they need each other. The talent pool just isn't deep enough at those weights that they can stand alone. They have to fight. And that Claressa Shields knows what her numbers are, what they really are, and what she really draws, and she would make the rematch with Savannah contingent upon this.
I don't want to jump to conclusions.
But it gives me the impression that you don't want this rematch. You don't really want it, because you know what your numbers are, and you know that your promoter don't got the same kind of dough here in America that Sky Sports and Boxer have in the UK.
You know that, so why are you playing games?
Is it because you don't want to have to deal with her again? Oh, Claressa won the fight. She definitely won, but her account of events isn't what I saw. You didn't dominate her. You didn't own her. You got hit with bombs.
Claressa landed punches too, but Claressa's not particularly heavy-handed. Savannah is.
Don't tell me that you're too good for a Savannah Marshall rematch when you literally scheduled a rematch with Hannah Gabriels right after that. And if not for Hannah testing positive for a ped, you would have fought her 2 times.
That's why it didn't happen.
But you were willing to fight her 2 times for far less money than you would have made with Savannah in a rematch. That's telling.
Why fight Hannah for less?
I have my suspicions. The bottom line is, Claressa Shields' demand is not an outlandish one, but it is unrealistic because you know what your numbers are.
You know your promoter.
You know what he can and can't do. So when you demand this, is it because you don't really want the rematch? Elsewhere in the world of boxing, former WBA super lightweight champion Isaac Cruz expressed his interest in a fight with 3-division champion Emmanuel Navarrete, saying it would be a great fight for Mexico and for all the boxing fans. I hope it can happen in 2025, if not then in 2026 or 2027, or in the not-so-distant future. Now, I'll admit that if you told me Isaac Cruz and Emmanuel were fighting this weekend, I gotta see it. Pressure fighter versus pressure fighter, Mexican slugger versus Mexican slugger, of course. But there's a reason that Isaac, who's still at 140 right now, en route to an Angel Fierro fight, is targeting someone who's way down there at 130.
Communicates weakness.
Don't try to sell me on otherwise. If what you wanted was a Mexican shootout with a Mexican fighter like yourself, William Zepeda is right there at 135, and he's a bona fide 135. He's not a smaller fighter who moved up in weight like Emmanuel. Emmanuel, whose stint at 135 lasted 1 fight, the Dennis Berenchik fight that he lost, which is likely why Isaac wants to fight him.
Because he knows he's not a true 135-pounder, and he just watched him lose there.
I know what you're thinking, that Emmanuel Navarrete puts on considerable size in between fights, and the night of, he rehydrates quite a bit. But he's not a true 135-pounder. He's not a true lightweight, which is why when he was there, he had man boobs, and he was soft in the body.
He was jiggling all over the place.
I would say that 135 pounds looks to be Emmanuel's ceiling, and that's a division where he'd have to acclimate.
I don't think he can move up much further than that. I don't think he can go to 140, at least not go to 140 and be effective.
That's where Isaac Cruz is. That's where he still is right now, en route to an Angel Fierro fight. If I had to pick a couple of fights, interesting ones for Isaac, it wouldn't be Emmanuel, even though that's not a bad shout, but it wouldn't be Emmanuel. It would be William Zepeda at 135, or maybe Subriel Matias at 140. Pressure fighter versus pressure fighter with Matias, another chapter in the age-old Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry. Those all make for great fights.
Those ain't the ones he's calling for, though.
You have to give Sean Gibbons and Isaac Cruz credit. They've managed to turn a glorified loss to Gervonta Davis into some semblance of name value. When I look at Isaac, all I see is a one-trick pony. A limited fighter, a pressure fighter, and I do like pressure fighters, but he's not one of the good ones. What separates Isaac Cruz from a Gustavo Lemos in terms of offense, in terms of implementation, really?
Are they so different?
You know that I think Keyshawn Davis, at 135 pounds, would do to Isaac Cruz what we just saw him do to Gustavo Lemos. That's right. If you stand in front of Keyshawn, that's what's going to happen. But that's how Isaac fights. He really doesn't have a choice. His limitations are all centered around his very small frame, that he's a portly fellow, not too tall, not too long. He doesn't have a choice but to fight that way.
That is, to be a pressure fighter. Now, he could stand to be a better pressure fighter.
So you think Keyshawn Davis would knock out Isaac where Gervonta Davis could not?
Yeah, because Gervonta's overrated. His power's overrated. This guy needed 12 rounds for a one-legged Yuriorkis Gamboa.
Suffering a wardrobe malfunction. You're talking about the same Gamboa that got stopped in less time by a journeyman in Castellanos. Castellanos stopped him in 7. The great Gervonta Davis needed 12, and the guy was quite literally standing on one good leg. So when your claim to fame is that Gervonta Davis didn't knock you out, well, that's not saying much.
That's Isaac's claim to fame.
That he went the distance with Gervonta, that Gervonta didn't knock him out. But what if I tell you that Gervonta's power is overrated? This is how Americans view boxing. They tell themselves that because the guy went the distance with Gervonta, he must be good. So who's the best guy that Isaac beat, if he's so good?
Best guy that he fought and the best guy that he beat. Who is it?
Because I don't think Gervonta Davis is anything special, I'm not going to think Isaac Cruz is anything special for going the distance with him.
Basic.
You know, he's expressed his interest in a potential Emmanuel Navarrete fight. I don't know how close we are to a fight like that because Emmanuel literally just moved back down to 130 where he's still WBO champion.
Manuel's at 130. Isaac's at 140.
And Isaac doesn't even have a belt at 140. So what incentive is there for Emmanuel to jump up 2 weight classes to fight you? You don't even headline your own shows.
He headlines his own main events. You're an undercard fighter.
No, I don't think it's a bad shout. If you made it, I think people would watch it. But it's not that realistic a fight, being honest. It's not that realistic. Men's super middleweight news, Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford have met separately with Turki Al-Sheikh in London, presumably for what will be the fight between them.
Some preliminary reports are already indicating that September is the potential fight date for the fight between them.
The former 3-division Ring Magazine champion and reigning WBA junior middleweight titleist is finally within reach of a dream fight with Saul Canelo Alvarez. Multiple sources have informed the Ring that extraordinary efforts are being made to put the fight together for later this year. ESPN Deportes' Julius Julian has suggested a deal is already in place. Other sources have suggested it can happen as early as May, though such plans sound extremely ambitious. But what has Turkey's endeavor into boxing been, if not extremely ambitious?
What it's been.
Alvarez was in London for the inaugural Ring Magazine Award ceremony and made it a point to meet with Turki Al-Sheikh, the driving force behind Riyadh's season and new owner of the Ring. Al-Sheikh and his group presented this weekend's ceremony while also meeting with boxing royalty, including Alvarez, to discuss big business in 2025. The moment Crawford heard his name mentioned, he rearranged his weekend plans.
He flew out.
I'm like a genie when you rub his lamp, Crawford said, posting a picture outside London's Heathrow Airport on Sunday. Once you call upon me, I appear to grant you one wish, because I'm a free genie, not one in cuffs. What was seemingly an impromptu visit to the United Kingdom for pressing matters and pressing business, namely the Canelo Alvarez fight. And thus, Al-Sheikh met with Crawford on Sunday, one day after he had productive talks with Alvarez about general business for the year ahead. Alvarez is still putting together plans for a targeted May ring return to defend his Ring, WBC, WBA, and WBO super middleweight titles. Crawford, who just moved up to junior middle in 2024, would advance another 2 weight divisions for what he has repeatedly referred to as a legacy fight. Crawford has not fought since August 3rd. Unanimous decision win over Israel Madrimov to win the WBA and interim WBO junior middleweight titles. The fight headlined Riyadh season's U.S. launch at the BMO Stadium in Los Angeles, California. Al-Sheikh was always keen to deliver an Alvarez versus Crawford fight, but briefly paused those plans once Alvarez didn't show interest in the fight. He instead moved forward with a championship defense versus Edgar Berlanga, whom he outpointed over 12 rounds last September in Vegas. Neither Alvarez nor Crawford have fought since then. It is unclear, though, at this point doubtful, whether Crawford would take a fight
Before he fights Canelo.
before the hoped-for showdown with Alvarez. All signs still point to Alvarez fighting in May, as he has already put out feelers for a notable enough opponent to headline a pay-per-view event in the United States. Those plans can obviously change in a hurry, though. Alvarez's presence in London this weekend is proof enough.
Taking a fight right before the Canelo fight is a risky endeavor when you're so close to that last brass ring. Who do you fight? who do you keep busy with?
And where do you fight them? What, at 154? At 160? At 168? Now, I've seen some individuals in some circles float the idea that maybe what Terrence should do is fight William Skull, newly crowned IBF super middleweight champion.
Because if Terrence wins, he becomes a champion at a 5th weight, and that would make the Canelo fight an undisputed title fight. But you have to question, at 37 years old, at what would be his 5th weight.
Is that too risky? Terrence Crawford is 37 years old. He would be jumping up 2 weight classes north of 154 to 168 to where maybe you're a better boxer than this guy technically and tactically, but he is still naturally bigger than you are, and that matters.
Hey, you're supposed to do this right before you fight Canelo. You're gonna roll the dice?
It's a big undertaking, a very big undertaking, but that's what Turkey El Sheikh is all about. Turkey, who said they talk a lot about the fights, but what happens in the end is that the final answer is with us. Prepare soon for announcing the biggest schedule for the year in boxing history.
What do we expect that schedule to look like?
They're already off to a fantastic start with the February 22nd show, Better Be versus B-Vol 2, and all of those undercard fights. But what else Turkey might have in mind is the Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney rematch,
Ben versus Eubank,
Canelo versus whoever he's fighting in May, and of course, Canelo versus Crawford. Terrence Crawford, who said, "I'm going to shock the world. Watch. The best is yet to come. I had it in my back pocket this whole time."
So how are you supposed to give Terrence Crawford any kind of odds against Canelo when a William Skull fight might be too risky?
How does that work?
Terrence's chance against Canelo is that even though Canelo is fully acclimated to 168, he's not a big 168. He is a naturally smaller fighter who moved up in weight. His physical dimensions, at least to Terrence, are not physically imposing.
Though somebody else's might be at 168, and that creates a separate problem. That against some other 168-pounders with more size, more height, and more length than a Canelo Alvarez, the assignment becomes dangerous.
And Canelo isn't?
No, he is, but the whole point of this is to make it there, to make it to Canelo Alvarez and show him what you got.
I never said it was a guarantee that Terrence beats Canelo. I don't know that Terrence beats Canelo. He wants to try.
To get that chance, he has to tread carefully. And I don't know that a William Skull fight is a good idea. That jeopardizes what you're here for. You're moving up there for a Canelo fight.
Just saying.
See how it breaks down. But if the focus of their efforts is to ensure that Terrence gets his crack at the apple with Canelo, they're going to tread carefully. They're going to think long and hard about what they want Terrence to do in the interim, if there even is an interim. Because you saw what they said. This fight could happen as soon as May, so that we don't have to wait.
We'll see.